Welcome back to the Wolverine.com podcast, video edition. I'm John Borton, and we have the man of the hour here who has most graciously made some time for us in a very busy season for him. He's got a date down in San Antonio with the Michigan basketball team. Play-by-play man, Brian Boesch. Brian, great to have you with us, and thanks for being on.
You got it, John. Happy to be here.
Well, Sweet 16 time. There are 16 teams left in college basketball. Two of them happen to be Big Ten teams. One of them happens to be a team that a lot of people were saying didn't belong in this tournament because of some of the travails and the growing that it did throughout the season. And we all know who that is. Give us your lay of the land going into the Sweet 16.
Well, from a Michigan standpoint, they certainly figured out the right time to string together a couple of wins. For them to go ping-ponging back and forth for more than a month on what we saw in Indianapolis, the first trip against Indiana. I mean, listen, we all knew that what they unearthed this past weekend was feasible. It was in the arsenal. For them to unleash it on Colorado State and Tennessee, two really good teams, two clubs that I think had they emerged from this pod, they would have been threats in San Antonio. It speaks to what this team can do. And for me, the two guys who were the stars of the show, really in both games, they're the reason why Michigan's here. Hunter Dickinson and Eli Brooks were fantastic. I think that was, when you look back from Eli Brooks' standpoint, I'm sure there have been games where he maybe has defended better. I'm not an expert on that. But from an offensive side, he's never had a better game. You think back to last year in the round of 32 against LSU, he had a game. But this eclipsed it against one of the best defenses in college basketball. He just has a will to keep this thing going. And considering what he had to do, the extra load that he had to shoulder, you can't help but feel so good for him. The whole team, but Eli in particular, what he has meant to this club. And listen, Hunter Dickinson's this team's best player. He's their star. He's got to be great. Especially if you're a double-digit seed, your star has to be great for you to advance in the NCAA tournament. And Hunter's 2 for 2.
Yeah, and I wrote a column after that game about the big man and the old man helping this team into the Sweet 16. And that's what you had, those two standout players really giving it their all and delivering when Michigan most needed it against the team that most, again, thought, at least nationally, was going to take Michigan down. Everybody regarded Tennessee so highly, and they played so well. But I will say this, in that game, despite the efforts of Dickinson and Eli, if you didn't have other guys coming in, if you didn't have a freshman point guard stepping up when you lose your starting point guard from the entire season all year again, if you didn't have a Terrence Williams with the putbacks and the toughness and other guys that contributed so much, you still might have not have gotten there. Talk a little bit about some of the guys beyond Dickinson and Brooks that stepped up in this last game.
Well, let's just go down the list, right? And I think Frankie Collins was the one who stole the headlines against the Rams. For him to go from basically getting a few minutes in the first half and occasionally a few minutes in the second half to playing 30 or more minutes in both games this past weekend. And Dylan Burkhardt had a great comparison of his usage. I think he was around 12% usage in the two games against Colorado State and Tennessee, and he was north of 20% during the regular season. I do think at times he tried to force things when he was only playing 6-8 minutes. He let the game come to him, and even though he didn't load up the box score by any stretch against the Vols, I thought he played really well. I thought he did the right things. And as a point guard, listen, sometimes you're going to be able to go off and get your points. Sometimes others are going to be hot. Others are going to be open, or others are just going to be Hunter Dickinson. That also helps. T. Will, what he did in that second half, he played the final 7.5 minutes. I mean, we've seen Michigan go with its starting group really from that around 6 to 8 minute mark and ride them the rest of the way. Well, Caleb Houston was struggling a little bit. He didn't have Devante Jones and those two putbacks from Terrence Williams. I mean, I'm always taken back to the quote that Phil Martelli said leading into last season, and he just said, Terrence Williams affects winning. And that's the perfect example. He scored 6 points in the second half, and it wasn't on anything drawn up for him. It was two putbacks and a 2-for-2 trip to the line that was absolutely massive. So, I mean, that's a young man who understands his role, embraces it. We're all in the moment right now, but I'm really excited what that young man can become starting next year. I mean, he's got a bright future, and I think he can take that leap. Moussa Diabate, he's been up and down, but we saw some flashes from him more so against Tennessee than Colorado State. And you think about it, John. I mean, Michigan has won 2 games in the last 2 weeks, and Caleb Houston hasn't scored. So for them to be able to overcome that, and we see the effect that he can have with that second half against Colorado State, that just goes to show you that other guys are piecing it together. I think the two prerequisites are Hunter and Eli. If they don't play well, Michigan's probably in trouble, especially considering the 3 teams they're going to be in San Antonio alongside Michigan. But anybody else, it certainly helps. And there are guys who it's a scale. It's not all everybody else on the same wavelength. But if anyone else struggles, there are other options for a teammate to pick them up, and we saw that last weekend.
Yeah. Before we move on to one of those teams that the one that's directly ahead from Michigan, I want to ask you a couple of other questions that are maybe peripheral to the advancement, but certainly pertinent. You saw in the arms of Juwan Howard after that game, a young man that he had recruited, and Tennessee's excellent guard. You, you just know, the super cynics are saying, well, Juwan's trying to rehab his image and all that. Anybody that knows Juwan Howard at all knows that he is totally genuine, and that's a kid he cared about. Your thoughts on that moment and how it kind of spread around the country? Maybe not quite as much as the Wisconsin incident, but what it does say about Juwan.
Well, just to get the negative folks out of this first and quickly, the reality is that's the byproduct of what happened at Wisconsin, is that you are going to have a small section, a loud minority who will say, oh, well, this is just a show. This isn't who he actually is. Check this out, blah, blah, blah. I mean, hey, I think I'm someone who always allows people second chances. I think we all should be that way. Listen, what happened at Wisconsin wasn't good. It was very, very bad. But it went against decades of what we know about Juwan Howard. Are we going to let somebody be defined by decades or by a few split seconds and some bad decisions? If we're going to choose the latter, well, I don't think I should be on a platform talking. I'm guessing a lot of people who are listening to this probably wouldn't belong on any sort of platform. We all have our moments, right? I also don't have a spotlight on me constantly. Juwan Howard does. So it was a special moment. It was a moment that, the reality is it's born out of months and months of work and dedication and years in that specific dynamics case of a relationship. And I mean, listen, you hear it a lot from Coach Howard, from others that, things are bigger than basketball. Michigan wants to win just like Tennessee wanted to win. But when the game's over, we all become people again. Things move on, and you have a winner and a loser, but I think we're all in this together in a lot of ways. And I do think that that's the case in the basketball world, especially with that relationship with Kennedy Chandler. So, it's a special moment. And again, I think when you stack up the good and the bad of Juwan Howard, there's a lot more of what we saw this past Saturday than what happened last month in Madison.
No doubt. And you note that after the game, it's people, and a couple of the people that were very close and have been very meaningful to Juwan Howard embraced him. That would be one Chris Webber and Ray Jackson. We know that Jalen Rose was around for the previous game against Colorado State. Your thoughts on the Fab Fivers swooping back around and being a couple of them being involved in the post game speech in the locker room.
Well, it was cool because Chris Webber. We all saw the video that Michigan put out. He said something not quite as passionate and not quite as emotional, but similar to my broadcast partner Terry Mills, just saying, "Hey, tell everybody that I'm back. I'm here. I want to be involved. I want to be around." And we all know kind of that background and that story. Um, and I mean, listen, in Juwan Howard's introductory press conference, Ward Manuel was asked about the banners, was asked about the Fab Five. We all knew that this was going to be a story, a part of the conversation, a part of the narrative. Listen, time heals a lot of wounds. Time allows people to, explain themselves. Time allows for people to understand the big picture. Case in point, what we experienced with Juwan Howard a month ago. Um, it's an opportunity to do that. And regardless, Chris Webber wasn't there. Ray Jackson wasn't there for that. They were there to support Juwan Howard. They were there to support Michigan basketball. And whatever, if that's what, if that's the catalyst, if that's the spark to get that, then I think everybody's better off for it. The players, the coaches, the fans, those individuals themselves. And I thought it was great to see. And listen, but C-Web and Ray were right behind us. They were loud, like they contributed to this, just like Jalen did. He was on the other side. We saw him. We heard the other two on Saturday. They were very involved, and hey, tip your cap to them. They helped this victory on Saturday too.
There you go. A couple of hardcore Michigan fans who have been there and know what these players are going through. Let's move forward. Thursday night down in San Antonio, you've got Michigan and Villanova, not the Villanova team that Michigan lost to a few years back in the national championship game, but still a formidable opponent. One that, there's some teams, as you look at some of the teams that they've lost to, you say, well, Michigan has more of a chance in this game than what your seeding might say to people that don't know anything about these teams.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I look at, I mean, they really did challenge themselves. I mean, they didn't lose to a team that did not go to the NCAA tournament. I think the thing that stood out to me in watching the game against Ohio State was Michigan's had 3 straight wins where they've come from behind. And I'm not saying that Michigan is unable to do the same against Villanova, but the longer you drag that out, if you're down, the tougher and tougher it is because they do a lot of things that are required at this stage of the season really, really well. They average 10 turnovers a game, so they're not going to hurt themselves very much. They are the best free throw shooting team potentially ever, not just this season, potentially ever. That is a massive asset. And they are very comfortable with taking their time. They are one of the slower tempo teams in all of college basketball. They want to drag things out. So them bleeding 20 seconds worth of a clock before getting into their offense with 3 minutes to go up 5 is not a reaction to the game. It is what their DNA is. This team to me is very similar to some of the Virginia teams that one won the national championship. Others have gotten deep. I think that's similar to kind of the Jay Wright MO. Yeah, it's not the 2018 team. I mean, I know there are a lot of Michigan fans that are still sad about 2018, but Villanova we can all get mad about 2013. 2018 Villanova they won every NCAA tournament game by 10 plus. They were, that was great. This is not that team. I know Gillespie's still on there. There is a fingerprint on that. Jay Wright's still there. But they are just so fundamentally sound. And I was surprised at how many people were kind of doubting them. I heard a lot of bracket analysts. I didn't see a lot of Villanova in the Final Four. I didn't see a lot of Michigan either, but maybe that's a hat tip to Arizona as the 1 seed. But this is a 2 seed that they're really good. This can be a tough out, just like Tennessee. But as we saw, Michigan, if they play well, if their top 2 do what they can do, they've got a real chance.
You mentioned their deliberateness on offense. Now, does this Is this acceptable to Michigan? Is it an okay? We can play that kind of game, or is it something that you would expect Michigan to try to force them out of?
I don't necessarily think they're going to try to force them out of it. I do think Michigan's going to want to play the faster game. I think it'll be very obvious to see, okay, 10 minutes into the game, I think we're going to know who's dictating the tempo. I think it's that significant, but I don't think it's a lifeblood, required way for Michigan to be able to play by going up and down. I guarantee you'll see Juwan Howard do that big motion and try to force his players from the defensive side of the floor to the offensive side off of a rebound. We'll see that a few times, but no, I don't think. And again, I haven't watched every Villanova game, but watching the game, watching a few of theirs against Big East foes in their tournament when they won that league title. Um, you know, they don't want to have as many possessions, and against a team like Michigan that has a big like Hunter Dickinson, that they just don't have the size to go up against. They've got great players, but they don't have somebody who can be that one-on-one cover against Hunter. They'd love to minimize the touches because of how efficient Hunter has been.
For the more casual fan, or maybe the Big Ten oriented fan who is not deeply familiar with Villanova, who would you say? Who would you tell them to look out for in this game?
In terms of, you talking about a comp or just players to watch?
I'm talking about players to watch for Villanova, and ones that have really hurt people all year.
Yeah, I mean, it starts with Colin Gillespie. I mean, the dude's shooting 42% from three. I mean, he's an elite level shooter. He's willing and able to get players involved. I think he's their assist leader. So I mean, what he brings, I mean, he's the head of the snake, as we hear a lot from different teams. In the game against Ohio State, tough not to be impressed with Jermaine Samuels. He's a guy who, he's not their focal point by any stretch, but good rebounder. He's going to be a hassle on the inside. Again, not the biggest dude in the world, but certainly watch out for him. But for me, I mean, Gillespie, I'm sure I'm sure people in the Big Ten are like, man, when the heck is Eli Brooks leaving this league? I'm guessing there's a lot of people in the Big East who feel the same way about Gillespie. To me, he's probably going to get his. But outside of Kennedy Chandler, with those second half, blow bys to the basket, you think about the best players on both Colorado State and on Tennessee. Michigan was able to neutralize the David Roddies, the Isaiah Stevens of the world on Colorado State. We didn't see anybody really other than Chandler go off. If Uroš Plavšić is going to be the guy who's playing the best on Tennessee, you'll take it. If Michigan can tilt Colin Gillespie to a 50th percentile game, that would serve Michigan really well.
So I know you are not Dr. Bush, and I suspect you're not staying in a Holiday Inn Express in San Diego. Not San Diego, that would be San Antonio. But as you look at this game, so many people are wondering about Devante Jones. Has to miss that first game, concussion. Was not clearly himself in when he tried to play, and I know he took another bang to the head. How I guess what is your expectation level or optimism level that he can come back? I know he's feeling good and has proclaimed that he's going to be back in this thing. How do you look at it at this point?
So it was communicated to us during the game on Saturday that it was an illness that cost him the second half, but that they expect him to be fine. So to me, it wasn't, it's going to be vague. That's kind of how it goes. But I think the main point of that was that I don't think it was tied to what he was going through via concussion protocol. I don't know that, but that's what I gleaned from how it was approached, from how Devante looked after the game. Again, you're right. I'm not a doctor. I don't know. But to me, I think it was just kind of a couple of, he hit two potholes on the drive, right? Like they were two separate things. I think they're unrelated. I mean, this is a young man who gave up social media for a while, and he made it a point to tweet out that he's ready, or that he's healthy. I think is how he put it. So, I think he'll be all right. I'd be pretty surprised if he didn't play and play a decent amount. But now, I think you can really mix things up. Devante Jones and Frankie Collins. This is why I'm not paid the big bucks to figure out what I would do from a rotation standpoint, from a starting lineup standpoint, from a stretch run standpoint. I don't know what you would do. It's probably dependent on the game. I've likened it to, if you play like a racing video game, like a Mario Kart. Devante Jones is that 50cc. Frankie's that 100, where they both can do it, but Frankie's just a little faster. Devante's a little more deliberate. That's not good or bad, or that's just how I see it. I'll be fascinated how that goes, and I think that's it's not going to be something Juwan Howard and his coaching staff unveils, because I think it's going to be something that Jay Wright and company are going to be sitting there scratching their head about too.
All right. Well, you anticipated my next question in terms of how you divide up the time between those guys, and we'll all get to see that. But let's wrap it up with this. I mean, your gut feeling about this one. Michigan is certainly been the surprise of the tournament in terms of the people that are left, other than St. Peter's, of course. Give me your gut feeling on this one and how it goes, and whether or not Michigan can make it one more weekend in the tournament.
It's interesting. I was looking back at some of the previous Sweet 16 games, and I think we all, because there's 3 or 4 days of expectation, we kind of get a pause in the tournament. Anyone's going to talk themselves into the game being close. The last 3 Sweet 16 games for Michigan have been over by early second half, 2 wins, 1 loss. The Texas Tech game being the loss, but just throttling Texas A&M, and then last year blitzing Florida State down the stretch. Maybe this is just me being naive and saying, well, hey, I'm going to talk myself into a close game, but I think both these teams have ways to hurt the other team offensively. I don't anticipate there being some big 15-0 run that allows one team to go on a huge run and take control of the game. To me, this feels like it's down to the wire, sitting there with 8-10 minutes left. And why I'm fascinated about that is because, again, do you ride with Frankie or Devante? Terrence Williams was great. Do you have him in there in stretch time? What will Caleb Houston give you? Because he has to be better than what he was. He only shot the ball 4 times against Tennessee. So in terms of a feel, I don't know, but I do think that this game is not a 2-11 game in roster, right? In talent, that's not what this is. This feels more like a 2-3 or maybe a 2-6 type of a game, which means, again, we've talked about it. We talked about it last week. The seeds mean nothing at this point. It's about matchups. Villanova is really good. They don't terrify me. If I'm being honest, a potential Elite Eight game as a rematch with Arizona, that kind of terrifies me. But then they almost lost to TCU. So what do we all know? This is a 1-game deal. Who the heck knows? And you know what? Jay Wright's a heck of a coach, but we've seen Juwan Howard in his first matchup with some legends get a win. So
Yeah.
I like their chances. And hey, let's flip the script in San Antonio a little bit.
All right, we'll see. He is Brian Boesch, and you can hear him with Terry Mills on Thursday night, bringing you all the action from San Antonio and the Michigan Radio Network. Brian, great to have you with us, and appreciate so much your contributions, your observations, and travel well.
Hope to do it next week, John. Thanks.